Our story begins over 1,000 years ago, on a marshy piece of land called Thorney Island. It was a soggy, rather unglamorous spot, surrounded by the winding River Thames. Yet this is where a small community of Benedictine monks decided to build their home around the year 960 AD. They were led by St Dunstan, a very important figure in the English church. He wanted to create a place for quiet prayer and devotion, far from the hustle and bustle of nearby London. This first church was probably a simple wooden structure, nothing like the magnificent building we see today. It was a modest start for what would become one of the most famous churches in the world. These monks lived a quiet life, following the strict rules of Saint Benedict. Their days were filled with prayer, work and study. They farmed the land, copied manuscripts and looked after the poor. For about a century, their small monastery, dedicated to St Peter, was a peaceful but relatively minor religious house. However, its location was significant. It was close to the seat of royal power, and this proximity would soon change everything. The kings of England started to notice this little community of monks, and with royal attention came royal patronage. This was the first hint of the deep connection that would form between the abbey and the crown. The early royal connections were crucial. The Saxon kings, who ruled England at the time, began to see the monastery as a special place. They gave it land and money, helping it to grow. This royal support set the stage for a dramatic transformation. The monks couldn't have known it then, but their humble island home was destined for greatness. It was on the verge of becoming a symbol of the English monarchy, a place where kings and queens would be crowned, married and buried. The seeds of its future importance were sown in these early years of quiet monastic life, waiting for a king with a grand vision. This link between church and state became incredibly strong. The abbey wasn't just a place of worship, it was becoming a statement of power. When a king supported a monastery, it showed his piety and his wealth. For the monks, royal favour meant security and influence. This mutual relationship was the foundation upon which Westminster Abbey was built. The small, damp island was slowly being transformed into a site of national significance, a place that would witness the drama, the pageantry, and the tragedy of English history for the next 1,000 years. It was a journey that was just beginning. The man who truly put Westminster Abbey on the map was King Edward the Confessor. He came to the throne in 1042 and was a deeply religious man. He had spent many years in exile in Normandy, and he was very impressed by the huge grand stone churches he saw there. He decided he wanted to build something similar in England, a magnificent church to the glory of God. He chose the small monastery on Thorney Island for his project. It was conveniently located next to his new palace of Westminster. Edward wanted a church that would serve as his own personal place of worship and ultimately his final resting place. So, around 1045, the old Saxon church was torn down. In its place, a massive new church began to rise. This was a building on a scale England had never seen before. It was built in the Romanesque style, which was popular in Normandy. Think of huge, thick walls, rounded arches and massive pillars. It was designed to inspire awe and to show the power and devotion of the king. Edward poured a huge amount of money into its construction. This wasn't just a church, it was a statement. It was a symbol of a new era for the English monarchy, blending English traditions with Norman architectural might. This new church was known as the Westminster, to distinguish it from St Paul's Cathedral, the Eastminster, in the City of London. It was consecrated on the 28th of December 1065, a grand ceremony filled with bishops and nobles. Sadly, King Edward was too ill to attend. He died just a week later and was buried in front of the high altar in his magnificent new church. His burial here was a pivotal moment. It established the abbey as a royal burial church, a tradition that would be followed by monarchs for centuries to come. Edward had created not just a building but a legacy. Edward's church would become the heart of the English nation. By choosing to be buried there, he had linked the abbey to the monarchy forever. His piety was so great that he was later made a saint, and his tomb became a holy shrine, a place of pilgrimage. The abbey he built was a powerful symbol of the Norman influence that was about to sweep across England. It stood as a testament to his vision, a bridge between the old Anglo-Saxon world and the new Norman one. The stage was now set for the next chapter in the abbey's dramatic story. The year 1066 was one of the most dramatic in English history. After King Edward the Confessor died, the throne was claimed by Harold Godwinson. It is almost certain that Harold was crowned in the newly completed Westminster Abbey, though the records are a little hazy. This ceremony, however, was just a prelude to the main event. Later that year, William the Conqueror invaded from Normandy, defeated Harold at the Battle of Hastings, and marched on London. To legitimize his rule and show that he was Edward's rightful successor, William knew exactly what he had to do. He had to be crowned in Edward's church. So on Christmas Day in 1066, William the Conqueror was crowned king in Westminster Abbey. This was a hugely significant moment. It was the first coronation in English history for which we have a detailed account, and it cemented the Abbey's role as the nation's coronation church. By being crowned there, William was physically and symbolically connecting himself to the last great Anglo-Saxon king, Edward the Confessor. He was telling the English people that he wasn't just a foreign invader, but their rightful king, anointed by God in this most holy of places. The tradition had begun. The coronation ceremony itself was a tense affair. The new Norman lords and the defeated Anglo-Saxon nobles were all gathered inside the abbey. The Norman guards outside heard the shouts of acclamation from within, and fearing a rebellion, they set fire to the nearby houses. Panic erupted, but the ceremony continued. This dramatic event showed just how important the coronation was. It was a piece of political theatre designed to secure a shaky claim to the throne. From that day on, almost every English and British monarch has been crowned in Westminster Abbey, following the precedent set by William. The coronation established a powerful link between the monarch, the church, and the people. The ceremony involves the monarch taking an oath to serve the country and being anointed with holy oil, a deeply religious moment that sets them apart. Being crowned in the abbey, next to the tomb of St. Edward, gave the monarch a special kind of authority. It wasn't just about political power, it was about divine right. This tradition, born out of the turmoil of 1066, has endured for nearly 1,000 years, making Westminster Abbey the sacred stage for the nation's most important royal ceremony. Fast forward almost 200 years to the reign of King Henry III, who ruled from 1216 to 1272. Henry was a great admirer of St. Edward the Confessor. He was also a man with a passion for art and architecture, and he was determined to honour his hero in the grandest way possible. He looked at Edward's Norman Abbey and decided it wasn't magnificent enough. Inspired by the soaring Gothic cathedrals he had seen in France, like Reims and Amiens, he decided to completely rebuild the abbey in this breathtaking new style. It was an incredibly ambitious and expensive project. In 1245, the work began. Henry III demolished most of Edward's church and started again. This new abbey was designed to be a palace of God. The Gothic style was all about light and height. Pointed arches, ribbed vaults and huge stained glass windows replaced the dark, heavy features of the old Romanesque building. The idea was to draw the eye upwards, towards heaven. The abbey was to be taller, brighter and more beautiful than any church in England. It was a massive undertaking, a testament to Henry's deep faith and his desire to create a fitting shrine for his favourite saint. At the very heart of Henry's new church was a magnificent new shrine for Edward the Confessor. He had Edward's body moved to a new tomb, located in a specially built chapel behind the high altar. The shrine was a stunning creation, decorated with gold, jewels and intricate mosaics made by Italian craftsmen. It immediately became the spiritual focus of the abbey and one of the most important pilgrimage sites in England. People came from all over the country to pray at the shrine, seeking miracles and healing from the saintly king. Henry III himself planned to be buried nearby, forever close to his revered predecessor. This rebuilding project took decades and consumed a vast portion of the royal income. Henry's obsession with the abbey even caused political problems, as his barons complained about the enormous cost, but he was relentless. By the time he died in 1272, the eastern end of the church, the choir, the transepts and the chapter house were all complete. He was buried in the abbey as he had wished. He had transformed Westminster Abbey into the glorious Gothic masterpiece we know today, creating a perfect setting for the coronations and royal burials that would continue to define its history. After the death of Henry III, the rebuilding of the abbey, well, it slowed down quite a bit. For over a century, the new Gothic choir and the old Norman nave stood side by side, creating a rather odd architectural mix. It was, you might say, a visible reminder of an unfinished dream. The money, quite simply, had run out. Work on the nave was finally restarted in the late 14th century, and it continued in fits and starts for the next 150 years. The builders, rather cleverly, decided to continue in the Gothic style that Henry III had started. This gives the abbey a wonderful sense of unity, even though it was, built over several centuries. The nave was finally completed around 1517, just as the Tudor dynasty was reaching its peak. This long construction period means that if you look closely, you can spot the subtle changes in architectural style. But the overall effect is one of harmony. The completion of the nave meant that the abbey was at last a whole and complete church, fulfilling the vision that began with Henry III. It was now a truly magnificent space, ready to host the grand ceremonies of a new and powerful dynasty. The Tudors, with their love of spectacle and display, would make full use of it. The final glorious addition to the medieval abbey came from the first Tudor king, Henry VII. He decided to replace the Old Lady Chapel at the eastern end of the church with a spectacular new building. This chapel, which bears his name, is really one of the jewels of European architecture. Built between 1503 and 1512, it is a masterpiece of the late Gothic style. Its most famous feature is the incredible fan-vaulted ceiling, which seems to hang in the air like stone lacework. It's a breathtaking display of architectural skill and artistic confidence, designed to be a magnificent burial place for the new Tudor royal family. Henry VII and his wife, Elizabeth of York, are buried in a stunning tomb at the heart of the chapel, surrounded by the tombs of many later monarchs, including Queen Elizabeth I and Mary, Queen of Scots. The Henry VII chapel was the final flourish of the abbey's medieval development. It represents the end of one era and the beginning of another. The abbey was now essentially complete, a stunning tapestry of Romanesque, Gothic and Tudor architecture. It stood as a powerful symbol of the nation's history, ready to face the religious turmoil of the Reformation that was just around the corner. While kings and architects were building the great church, a very different kind of life was unfolding in the abbey's cloisters. The cloisters are the covered walkways that form a square, enclosing a peaceful garden known as the Garth. This was the heart of the original Benedictine monastery. For the monks, this was their home, their workplace and their sanctuary. Here, they were shielded from the outside world, able to dedicate their lives to God according to the strict rule of St. Benedict. Their daily routine of prayer, reading and manual labour was centred around these quiet, contemplative spaces. The cloisters were the main arteries of the monastery, connecting the church to all the other important buildings. Leading off from the walkways were the chapter house, where the monks met each day to discuss business and confess their faults, the dormitory where they slept, and the refectory where they ate their meals in silence while one of them read from the scriptures. The cloisters themselves were used for study and exercise. The northern cloister, which was the sunniest, was used as a scriptorium, where monks would painstakingly copy and illuminate precious manuscripts. It was a self-contained world of faith and scholarship. Beyond the main cloister, there were also gardens and other monastic spaces. The little cloister housed the infirmary, a separate building where sick and elderly monks were cared for. This had its own chapel and garden, a peaceful place for recovery. The monks also had a kitchen garden, where they grew herbs and vegetables for their meals and for medicinal use. Today, a small part of this history is preserved in the college garden, which has been under continuous cultivation for over 900 years, making it the oldest garden in England. It's a hidden gem, a tranquil oasis in the heart of London. This monastic way of life came to an abrupt end in 1540 during the Reformation. King Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries, and the Benedictine community at Westminster was forced to leave. The abbey, however, was saved from destruction. Henry VIII granted it cathedral status, and later Queen Elizabeth I refounded it as a royal peculiar. This meant it was under the direct control of the monarch, not a bishop. The cloisters and their surrounding buildings were repurposed, becoming homes for the clergy and a school, Westminster School, which still exists today. The monastic world vanished, but its beautiful buildings remained. Westminster Abbey is not just a magnificent building, it is also a treasure house, filled with priceless works of art and historical artifacts that tell the story of its past. One of its greatest surviving medieval treasures is the Westminster Retable. This is an altarpiece, a painted wooden panel that would have stood on the high altar. Created in the 1270s, it is the oldest known panel painting in England. It is incredibly delicate and beautiful, decorated with scenes from the life of Christ and figures of saints, including St. Peter. It's a rare survivor, a glimpse into the colourful, richly decorated church that Henry III created. Another hugely important artefact kept at the Abbey is the coronation chair. This simple-looking oak chair was made around the year 1300 by order of King Edward I. He had it built to house the Stone of Scone, a sacred block of sandstone which he had captured from the Scots in 1296. The stone was a powerful symbol of Scottish nationhood, and by placing it inside the English coronation chair, Edward was making a very clear political statement. Every monarch since the 14th century has been crowned sitting in this chair, making it one of the most famous and historically significant pieces of furniture in the world. The Abbey's library and muniment room also hold a vast collection of precious manuscripts, royal charters, and historical documents. These records provide an unbroken link to the Abbey's earliest days. They include charters signed by Anglo-Saxon kings, the accounts for Henry III's rebuilding, and detailed records of coronations and funerals. These documents are a historian's dream, offering incredible insights into the daily life, finances, and politics of the Abbey over 1,000 years. They are the paper trail of history, carefully preserved within the Abbey's ancient walls. Beyond these famous objects, the Abbey is filled with countless other treasures. There are stunning medieval wall paintings, intricate sculptures, and beautiful stained glass windows, some dating back to the 13th century. The Cosmati pavement, a unique and complex mosaic floor in front of the high altar, is another masterpiece brought from Rome by Henry III. Each tomb and monument is a work of art in its own right, telling the story of the person it commemorates. Walking through the Abbey is like walking through a gallery of British art and history, with a new treasure to discover around every corner. For centuries, Westminster Abbey has been the grand stage upon which the great events of the British nation have been played out. Its primary role, of course, has been as the coronation church. Since 1066, this is where the nation has witnessed the crowning of its kings and queens in a ceremony rich with tradition and symbolism. The world watched as Queen Elizabeth II was crowned here in 1953, the first coronation to be televised. More recently, in 2023, the coronation of King Charles III continued this ancient tradition, connecting the modern monarchy to its deep historical roots within these sacred walls. But the Abbey is not just for coronations. It has also been the setting for many royal weddings, moments of national celebration. In 1947, the future Queen Elizabeth II married Philip Mountbatten here, a splash of colour in a grey post-war Britain. More recently, the wedding of Prince William and Catherine Middleton in 2011 captured the hearts of people around the globe. These joyful occasions transformed the ancient church, filling it with flowers, music and happiness, and adding new layers to its long and eventful history. Each royal wedding writes another chapter in the Abbey's story. The Abbey is also a place of final farewell. It is the burial place of 30 kings and queens, from Edward the Confessor to George II. But it is more than just a royal mausoleum. Over 3,000 people are buried or commemorated here, representing the best of British history and achievement. In Poets' Corner, you'll find the graves of Chaucer, Dickens and Tennyson. Scientists like Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin are buried in the nave. The tomb of the unknown warrior near the west door is one of the most poignant memorials, a grave holding an unidentified British soldier from the First World War, representing all who died for their country. These ceremonies and memorials have made the Abbey a focus for national life in times of joy and in times of sorrow. It is where the nation comes together to celebrate, to mourn and to remember. The state funeral of Sir Winston Churchill and the funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales, were moments of profound national grief, shared by millions through television. The Abbey provides a space for these collective experiences, a constant, reassuring presence at the heart of the nation's story. It is a building that has witnessed it all, a silent observer of history in the making. While Westminster Abbey is steeped in history, it is not a museum. It is a living, breathing church with an active congregation that worships here every day. To continue its work and serve its many visitors, the Abbey must constantly adapt to the needs of the modern world. One of the most significant recent changes was the construction of the Western Tower, completed in 2018. This is the first major addition to the Abbey's structure in over 250 years. Designed in a sympathetic Gothic style, the tower cleverly houses a lift and staircase. This new tower provides, for the first time, public access to the Abbey's triforium. This is a gallery high up above the nave, which the poet John Betjeman once called the best view in Europe. For centuries, this space was used for storage and was inaccessible to visitors. Now it houses the Queen's Diamond Jubilee galleries. Here, the Abbey can display its greatest treasures in a stunning setting, telling the story of its 1,000-year history through priceless artifacts. The Western Tower is a brilliant example of how modern architecture can be used to enhance and open up a historic building. Another important recent project has been the construction of a new sacristy. A sacristy is a room where clergy prepare for services and where sacred vessels and vestments are kept. For centuries, the Abbey's clergy had to use a small, cramped space. The new building, completed in 2020, provides much-needed modern facilities. It is discreetly located, ensuring it doesn't detract from the historic views of the Abbey. This project, like the Western Tower, shows the Abbey's commitment to being a working church, ensuring it has the facilities it needs to continue its daily round of prayer and worship. These modern additions are part of the Abbey's ongoing story. They demonstrate how this ancient institution is looking to the future as well as honouring its past. By improving accessibility and upgrading its facilities, the Abbey ensures that it can welcome the millions of pilgrims and tourists who visit each year, and that it can continue to function as a spiritual centre. It is a delicate balancing act, preserving a priceless heritage while embracing the demands of the 21st century. The Abbey has always evolved, and these new structures are just the latest chapter in its long history of change and adaptation.